Hello guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel. If you're new here, you're welcome, and if you're a returning subscriber, you're welcome as well. In today's video, we are going to learn how to draft and sew this beautiful shirt. So if this is something you would love to learn, kindly watch this video to the end. So right here is going to be my starting point line, and from there I'm going to be marking the length of my shirt, and the length I'm working with is 21 inches. So I'm going to mark the 21 inches across, and then I'm going to be using the biggest part of my measurement to fold the fabric. So the quarter of the biggest part of my measurement is 8.5, and I'm going to be adding 1 inch for sewing allowance and also 1 inch for the dart allowance. So altogether what I'm going to be cutting is going to be about 11 inches. So I'll just go ahead and cut it out. So after that, I'm going to be marking my waistline of 16 inches, and I'm going to mark it across here, and also mark my chest line of 7 inches, and again I'm going to be marking the 7 inches across here. So once that is done, I'm also marking my bust point measurement, which is 10 inches. And the next thing is to mark out the shoulder to shoulder measurement, which half of mine is 7 inches, and I'm going to be stopping at the chest line. So right now I'm going to mark the 1 inch shoulder slope, and I'll also mark the neck width of 3 inches, and then I'm going to connect that 3 inches to the 1 inch shoulder slope that I created to form the shoulder line, to form the shoulder slope, sorry. So once that is done, I'm going to come down by 1 inch for the neck depth at the back, and then connect it to the neck width of 3 inches. So after that, I'm going to create the dart leg, okay, and my dart, half of my dart is 3.5, and I'm going to be stopping at the chest line, unlike the front where you're going to be stopping 1 inch below your bust point, but for the back you'll be stopping at your chest line. And I'm going to be taking ½ inch on both sides of the dart. So after that, I'll just go ahead and connect it together just like I'm doing right now. So you're just going to be taking your dart intake like this. So the next thing is to determine half of my armhole, and then come out, go in by ½ inch, and then create the armhole curve just like I'm doing here. So once that is done, the next thing I'm going to do now is to take the quarter of my bust measurement plus 1 inch sewing allowance, okay. You don't need to add your dart allowance because you are not taking much dart around there. So I'm going to impute my quarter of my waist plus the dart intake I'll be taking away from there, and also 1 inch sewing allowance. I'll also repeat the same process for the lower part of my shirt. So just insert quarter of your measurement plus the dart intake and 1 inch for side seam allowance, and then I'm going to connect all of the marks together. So I'm adding ½ inch to the neck for the allowance, for the joining allowance, and the same thing for the shoulder line, for the shoulder joining allowance. So this is all for the back. I'll go ahead now and cut out the back. So right here, you're going to notch your dart so that it's easy for you when you want to stitch it. So this is my front pattern, and I'm using 2.5 inches for the button allowance. 1 inch is the actual button allowance, and the remaining 1.5 is for folding. You are going to be folding that 1.5 on top of the 1 inch, which is the button allowance. So I'm just trying to mark the shoulder line for the front to show that I'm on track. And from there, I'll come down by 3 inches, which is going to serve as the front neck depth. You know, I use 1 inch for the back neck depth. All right, so I'm also marking the neck width, which is 3 inches. So I'm just going to flip the back away and then mark the neck. I'm going to connect the front neck together and this is all for the front neck as well. And I'm also going to be adding half an inch allowance to the neck as well, okay, which is what we are going to use to join the collar to the neck. So I'm just cutting this out. There is nothing much about this shirt. This is very easy to make. So I'll just open up the button allowance as well. So once this is done, I'm going to be notching where I have my dart for the front. Okay, so your front dart is going to be stopping 1 inch below your bust. So for the sleeve, my round sleeve is 16 inches. So times 2 of it is what I'm going to be cutting, and it's going to be 32. But I'll be cutting this 32 on fold, and that's why I have 16 inches. For the length, I'm using 5 inches, but it has to be on fold, so I'm cutting 10 inches. Okay, so by the time I fold the 10 inches back again, I will have 5 inches. So I'll just go ahead and cut it out. So for the smaller gathers, the wideness is going to be 32 inches, just like the bigger one, and the length is going to be 6 inches, which means by the time I fold it together, I will have 3 inches. So the longer one is 5, while the shorter one is 3 inches. So on this button allowance part, I will go up by 2.5 inches, and on the side which falls to the side seam, I will go up by 1.5 inches. Okay, just like I'm doing. And you are going to connect from this 2.5 inches that I went up. You connect it to where you have your dart leg. Okay, I've gone ahead to stitch my dart together. So from the dart leg, you also connect to the side seam where I also marked 1.5 inches upward. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do now is to cut it out. Before you cut out, make sure the two front pattern are aligned on each other properly. So I'll go ahead now and cut this out. So after cutting out, I'll also reduce the back length by 1.5 inches because I've reduced the front length. So I'll go ahead and cut. So on this lower part of the shirt, you're going to be turning it with the bias. So this is the gathered sleeve. This is the longer one. I gathered it separately, and the shorter one as well, I also gathered it separately, because if you gather it together, it will be bulky. So what you do is to stitch them on top of each other, and then you sew it round the armhole. You must have taken all your side seam allowance, and then you go ahead and stitch the sleeve around the armhole. So the next thing now is to measure the neck, because the measurement is what I'm going to use to cut out the collar. So after measuring, what I have is 17 inches. Okay, you must have also stitched down your button allowance and then join the shoulder. So right here is my starting point line, and note that this fabric is on fold. The folded part is going to fall to the back, while the opening part will fall to the front. So I'm marking half of my round neck, which is 8.5, and that 8.5, I'm also going to determine the center point of the 8.5, and I'm going to be marking it. So on this side of the collar, I'm going to be going up by 1 inch. This side will fall to the front. So after going up by 1 inch, you connect it back to that center point I created. Now I'm going to determine the length, the height of the collar stand, which I'm using 1.25. Now on this part, I'll go in by 1/2 inch and then slant it back to the neck down below there. So the next thing now is also to take away the button allowance of 1 inch, and from there I'm going to take the length of my collar, which is 2.5 inches, and I'm going to roll the mark down. Now from the length of that collar upward, you also come out by 1/2 inch, just so that your collar can come out a little bit, and then connect it back down there. So on this side, I will go up by 2 inches and then connect it back to that length that I marked 2.5 inches upward. So this is a cut together collar. I'm not going to be separating the collar stand from the collar. This is how it's going to look like. So the next thing now is just to add 1/2 inch all around my collar. Okay, so after adding 1/2 inch all around, I'll go ahead and cut it out. So I'll be cutting two of this collar right here, and after cutting the two, I'm going to be ironing my soft stay on it. After ironing, I'll go ahead and stitch them together and also stitch it to the neck of my shirt. So Alright guys, so this is the final look of my shirt. I've not added the button to it, so I just use my pin to pin it down. So guys, thank you for watching this video to the end, and I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe to my channel, like and share this video, and I will see you guys in my next tutorial. Bye.